Hello, my name is Natalia. I'm a watercolor artist. I'm absolutely in love with watercolor technique, and I can endlessly observe how the colors mix with each other, forming unique combinations. Every time new and incredibly beautiful. Each picture created by watercolor is absolutely unique. I hope today we'll also be able to fall in love with you in this material, and so you're not afraid to work with him. I want to start with the basics. So, that the process of creating a picture give you a pleasure, I think it's important that the materials were of a good quality. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to do basic strokes and washes using ZenART supplies brushes, because I recently became their brand ambassador. Next, watercolor paints. If you are a beginner, so basic set of 12 colors will be enough. Paints can be in cuvets, in tubes, or liquid. I will work with paints from the cuvets. Next, we need a can of clean water to wash the brush. Any palette, it can be a ceramic palette or any white plastic saucer or ceramic saucer. Cotton pads or a piece of paper towel will be useful if you suddenly put too much water on the brush. To remove excess water from the brush can be made by wetting it on a cotton pad. Watercolor paper. Brand is at your discretion. I recommend it to take paper weighing at least 300 grams, so that when paper is wet, waves were not formed on it. Paper can be cold or hot pressed. The difference is that cold pressed paper has more expressive texture. I have cold pressed paper. We also need a piece of any paper to test the color. We load up color on the brush, and before starting to paint on the main sheet, we need to check intents of color. Sample we will do on this sheet. Brushes. This is a very important moment when working with watercolors. Today I will work with a round brush number 5, ZenART Supplies. ZenART Supplies? It's a London-based family business of art supplies, and their aim is to create a community of international artists to be able to help and inspire to each other. Round brushes are very comfortable and have a wide range of possibilities. Look, now I have wetted the brush and its tip has become very thin, and with this brush I can now paint thin lines. But if to press the brush a little harder, the line comes out quite white. It is very convenient. Before starting work, you can divide the sheet into 3 columns by pencil. And remember, our goal today is to train your hand. I always compare watercolor practice with a gym. When we go to the gym, we warm up first and then set out to the basic load. In painting, a similar situation. Before you begin a main workout, you need a warm-up, simple exercises. This is our goal today. Let's call it the watercolor gym. We start our workouts with a thin and thick line. I will work in 3 colors. I love bright colors in work. You can use the same colors or choose them to your taste. I make samples of color on paper, which we specially prepared for this and the beginning of the lesson. I like how they fit together. The palette looks harmonious. By the way, how to choose a harmonious palette by ourselves we'll talk in the next lesson. Before you start painting, I recommend to damp your paints. It's necessary to type the color more conveniently. I damped them with usual spray with water. And also I prepared a cotton pad so that you can remove excess water. So let's try to paint thin lines. When we work with a thin line, we try to keep the brush perpendicular to the sheet. Don't hurry, don't press the brush too hard. We painted several lines. You can continue to do the exercise until you are satisfied with the result. The next, wide lines. Unlike the previous exercise, hold the brush at an angle 45 degrees and press it harder. We paint several such lines. As a result, our hand remembers how hard it's to press the brush and at what angle to hold the hand to paint such a line. Let's try to paint brush strokes, similar to foliage. We will paint a line from the bottom upwards, starting slightly at the beginning of the brush, as well as painting a thin line, and increase the pressure in the middle of the brush stroke. Repeat several times. Now we will try to do the same, only from up to down. Put the brush in the beginning of the stroke. We begin to paint, slightly pressing, and increase the pressure on the brush in the middle of the stroke. We make several such lines. In my works, I often use this method when painting foliage in a free watercolor technique. After this exercise, try to put a few points. Next exercise. The principle of operation is similar to that one that was in the previous exercise. We begin to paint, slightly pressing and increase the pressure on the brush in the middle of the stroke. Only now our petals form a continuous line. We will paint a line of 3 and 2 petals. The more you practice, the better you will get. Next, short brush strokes. This exercise is a little easier and does not require much concentration, as it was necessary in the previous exercise. We make strokes from the bottom upwards. We start painting by pressing on the brush to get a wide base, and by the end of the stroke we reduce the pressure on the brush. We get lines like petals. Don't try to make them too similar to each other. The main thing is to understand the principle of creating such a brush stroke. We continue to work with the same stroke, just starting to paint it from top to bottom. Start painting by pressing on the brush and finish the stroke reducing the pressure on the brush. We are now developing the skill of owning your brush. These movements should become familiar to you. Next line is an exercise where we combine the two previous strokes and get a shape similar to a coffee bean. We have finished the first column. I hope that you succeeded and your hand accustomed to these movements of the brush. By the way, I want to add that before starting work on a large project, during which you will need several brushes, I recommend doing these exercises with each of your brushes. Now we will work with fills and then combine our exercises. We continue to work with brush number 5. So here you see a few chaotic spots. I will ask you not to attach great importance to the shape and size of these spots. Paint free. Here we will try to paint using wet on wet technique. What does it mean? This means that we paint and add color to the previous spot while it's still dry. And we see a very beautiful effect of infusing one paint into another. Sometimes we will add not only paint, but also water. If your water is too dirty, change it to clean. Mark a painting area with a pencil, if necessary. We take color, we make test on draft piece of paper. If you like the color and its saturation, start painting on the main sheet. Paint small freeform spot. Next, wash the brush and load up some water on it. We begin to paint next to the previous stroke, slightly touching its edge. See how beautifully these two spots mixed with each other. We continue to work on the same principle. Alternate strokes of paint and water. We try to work quickly until the spots are wet. This is the basis of this technique. Don't think about the shapes and size of spots. Focus on the process. Agree? This is like a meditation. During this exercise, you will feel how quickly you need to paint so that the paint does not have time to dry. You will also begin to understand how to make the color more or less saturated. I hope you did it all very well. The next exercise is a gradient fill. This exercise is a bit like the previous one, only now it will be a solid fill, not spots. We work on the same principle. Until the previous stroke is getting dry, we begin to introduce the next color and alternate strokes of color and water. As a result, we get a smooth, colorful fill. This is a very common watercolor technique. For example, when you paint sky, landscape, or other scenes where you need to fill large areas. I use all the same colors and work with the same brush. So we take the paint, do the sample on a piece of paper. Color suits me, but I want to add more water. We paint a wide line, and until it dries, we introduce another color. Look, what a soft transition we have between colors. Then I wash my brush, load up water on it, and do the same. We take the next color and act on the same principle until the end of the exercise, alternating colors and water. In the next exercise, we will try to combine several techniques that we have learned today. Make a mix of lines, points and fills. You can repeat after me or do it to your taste. In the next exercise, we will mix strokes, points and gradient. There is no certain sequence. You can repeat after me or give a free range to your fancy. Now you have already studied your brushes and paints better, and this exercise will be quite easy for you. The final exercise, paint circles. We will also use the wet on wet technique. We trained it a lot, and now you can confidently perform this exercise. We paint the first circle, and while it's still wet, we paint another one next to it, slightly touching the edge of the previous circle. We continue painting alternating spots of color and water until the end of the exercise. I hope that you liked this lesson. I'll be glad to see your progress. Follow us on Instagram and tag us if you will try these exercises. Have a great practice!